So today we're going to talk about some of the brutal beatings what I saw whilst I was in prison. Now, 90% of the violence I saw was in Doncaster, which is my local jail. And it was a real tough prison when it first opened. And, you know, I'm just an average Joe off the street. I was never around violence until I got to prison. And, you know, I wasn't really ready for that level of violence when I got there. Over time, you get desensitized to it. So, but anyway, I'm just going to talk about the time in Doncaster, which was the most violent by far prison that I've been to. And I've been to Walton, I've been to Norwich, I've been to Hull, I've been to Everthorpe, I've been to Ramby, Hatfield. So I've been to a few prisons, but Doncaster was like 90% of the violence I saw in prison was in Doncaster. So, first of all, people that say prison is a holiday camp, usually these sort of people are just losers, you know, just like I was a heroin addict. So prison for me wasn't as bad as what it probably would be to somebody who's got like a family, responsibilities, job, kids. You know, I didn't have none of that. So, you know, prison wasn't as bad for me as it would have been for like a normal person. And the thing is, people that say it's a holiday camp, I think that I can only talk of my own experience. Like, when I got out of prison, well, whilst I was in there, I hated it, you know, I was just counting the days down until I got out. And then when I got out, I kind of missed prison, you know, because you miss the structure. Like, you know, you get set in a routine. I had a job, I had friends, camaraderie. So I kind of missed that. You know, in prison I was somebody, and then you get out and you're back to being nobody, just average Joe on the street. So I think that's why some people say it's a holiday camp, because, you know, they're total losers and they've got nothing, they've got no friends, no family, and they miss that structure of prison life. But in prison it can be life and death in a second, over nothing, over somebody pushing in front of you in a queue, or, you know, somebody's had a bad letter and you say the wrong word. You know, it could be fighting for your life over nothing. And violence is different in prison. It's not like on the street where, you know, there's a couple of dudes arguing, one of them will throw a punch, fall on the floor, and then everyone will leave. In prison, if you get knocked out in a cell, you know, you'll get stamped out, you're getting your head smashed in, you know, it could be devastating. So, some of the worst beatings I saw, the first one, I didn't actually witness it, but it was my cellmate, and he smoked spice, but he was a nice dude. Everybody on the wing liked him, and it was the induction wing, so they mixed the YOs and the cons on the induction wing, and he was always mooching about trying to find spice, but he wasn't a dosser, you know, he had his own money and stuff. He was just like doing that like a side hustle, and he went into a cell with some Scousers, and these Scousers had been sent down from Liverpool, I don't know why, but they did not want to be in Doncaster, so they ended up turning on him, and he was in the cell smoking, him and this ginger kid from Donny, I'm not going to name him, and they took them both hostage. You know, this other kid was only a YO, he was only a kid, and they barricaded the door, took them both hostage, tied them to a chair, and they got my cellmate and slashed his neck, his face. It was a right mess, and I've never understood that. When you go to prison, it's like they give you like a reception pack, which has got razor blade, toothbrush, bog roll, shampoo, and, you know what I mean, out of that you can make a knife, a shiv. You can just get the toothbrush, burn away, and they used to give you a lighter as well, and you can burn away the bristles, get the two blades out of the razor blade, burn it into the toothbrush, and you've got a little shiv, a knife, a blade. And there's people in prison that's the first thing they do. They'll make a blade, they'll make a shiv. So they've kidnapped my cellmate and this ginger kid, tied him to a chair, barricaded the door, and just slashed all his face and neck. And the reason they did this was because they wanted a ship out. They didn't want to be in Doncaster, and that was like the thing back then. If you wanted moving, they would they'd just take people hostage, and then they'd have to move you. So yeah, eventually the screws came, flashbanged the grenade, got him out, but he was an absolute mess. He was covered in strike marks from the razor blades. And whilst he was in there, they was going to do it to the YO. But he said, no, don't do it to him, he's just a kid. If you're going to do it to me. Which, in my opinion, that's true bravery in the face of, adversity. So, kudos on him to that one. I can't remember his name, it's doing me head in. That's why I always say document everything in prison, because I wish I could remember his name, and then I would see how he got on, see how he is now. But I know the months after that, he used to wake up in the middle of the night, like screaming. He had stitches all over his face, he had to grow a beard. And I used to have to go down to education with all the YOs, and they'd all be saying, oh yeah, it was staged, he did it on purpose. And just to get a payout. I'm like, fucking hell, you don't know the half of it. And the Scousers what did it, they did get shipped out. And the guy what did it, he was like something out of a movie. He used to walk around with a trench coat, like the Matrix. So yeah, I don't know what happened to them. Well, that was one of the worst things that I saw whilst I was in Doncaster. Another one was my next door neighbour got beat to death. A kid from Barnsley. They had an argument on a visit, and they called him a crackhead, and then he just went back to the wing and went into his cell and beat him to death. And the paramedics came in, they took him out, and this is how crazy it was. Like, it was all right as he was coming out. They were carrying him out, and then he said, as he came out, he says, I'll see you when I get back in showers. After he'd just been beat to death, they brought him back to life in the cell. And then they put him in the ambulance, and on the way to the hospital, he died again in the ambulance, and they had to rehabilitate him and bring him back out to life again. So he did survive, but I can imagine the trauma that effect that had on him for the rest of his life. I've seen him since. So he did survive, but that was another brutal beating. And another one was a kid, I can't remember his name again. He was a younger kid, and he had the attitude, go up to someone, go up to the biggest guy in the yard, hit him, and everyone will respect you. And that's kind of what he did. But nobody respected him, he just got absolutely hammered. He went up, had an argument with this big dude, clumped him first, and this big dude just grabbed him, took him in their cell and absolutely hammered him. And as I walked past, I looked in, and he was smashing his head onto the toilet. Wet thumping noise, it was horrible. And he survived it, and the next day he had to walk around the wing with like a towel wrapped around his head so that screws couldn't see all the bruises, and both his eyes closed. Otherwise, they'd have looked on cameras and he'd have got nicked, and the other guy had got nicked. And so he took his licks, fair play to him. He didn't grass on anyone. He took it like a man, but he really got battered. But anyway, that's just a few examples of the beatings what I've seen whilst I was in prison. And like I say, I'm not a violent person. I don't enjoy seeing people get battered like that. I mean, if it's like an arranged fight, like Decker versus Danny, then I can watch that, it's good to watch. But if it's just someone getting absolutely hammered and battered, and I've seen guys knocked out, and they'll go on the top bunk and jump off and land on their head. It's just brutal, vicious beatings in prison. And people just remember that. If you're breaking the law, people say, oh, it's a holiday camp. It could be life or death. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video, press the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Bonjour.